A girl was born in a rich family. She had very comfortable life. Her every wish were fulfilled by her parents. She was liked by friends and loved at school by her teachers. All of a sudden, life was completely changed for a young girl who was happily living in Amsterdam, Holland with her parents. We are talking about 13 years old Jewish girl, Anne Frank, and the book Diary of a Young Girl. After German invaded Holland, Nazis started to impose harsh anti-Jewish measures. Brutality began with Jews, so Otto Frank, a father of Anne Frank, made plans for his family's safety. Although being forced to leave business after anti-Jewish laws, his Dutch associates and employees remained loyal friends. One morning, Frank's family slipped away from their home and went on hiding in the secret groups of rooms that were at the top of the office building of Otto Frank. They were soon joined there by a business associate of Otto Frank, Mr. Van Dan, her wife, and 15 years old son Peter, and later Albert Dussel. 8 Jews in the secret part of the building remained quiet during the day, during office hours, which was held as usual in the office of the building. Their friends in the office below, Mr. Kopuis and Mr. Kraler, Mep Van Santen and Eli Bosen, kept their secret. They brought food and even gifts and news of the outer world for hiding members. The news in the fall of 1942 was terrifying. Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany. He invaded most part of the Europe and took under his control. After in power, he started mass manipulation of majority of citizens. He started to portray Jews as subhuman beings and treated them like animals, and he considered them as anti-nationalists. He started building concentration camps on the different part of his occupation. Concentration camps were fitted with gas chambers that were filled with poisonous gases for the mass murder of Jewish people. In this brutality, 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were murdered. Physically strong Jews were exploited as slaves for more than 12 hours a day until they had strength in their body before they were sent to gas chamber for death. The torture that were given to them was unimaginable. Despite their long hours of slavery, they were supplied an ounce of bread and watery soup once a day. You can read the book Man's Search for Meaning to know the extreme harsh life in concentration camp. Within few months of hiding, the situation was shocking and terrible for the Franks family. They were living in constant fear and isolation. Imagine your situation during lockdown of COVID-19 pandemic. You were locked in home, constantly threatened with COVID infection. You were desperate to go outside and start a normal life. The situation was 100 times worse for a very young girl who was previously living a comfortable life. Cut off from outside world, she faced hunger, boredom, and constant cruelties of living in a confined quarters. As she was aware about the brutality of Jews by Nazis, there was ever-present threat of discovery and death. As for the title, this book is actually a diary of Anne Frank, which she maintained regularly during their hiding from 1942 to 1944. She expressed all her feelings in her diary during that period. All the story we mention here are her own words written in her diary. All the day they had to stay in complete silence to avoid attention from anyone. Being caught by Nazis meant the end of every members in a poisonous gas chamber of concentration camp. The fear and anxiety of death severely struck a very young mind. She was passing through her adolescence, so she was challenged with hyperactiveness, loneliness, and hormonal changes. All of a sudden, a girl with a large group of friends was all alone and lonely. For a normal young child, condition was sufficient to break down mentally, but Anne found a way to balance her emotions and channelize them by writing on her diary. For a young child to have this level of understanding was wonderful. Anne was always extrovert and talkative girl. For this reason, she was misunderstood as being rude and insensible person by hiding members. She writes on her diary, Mrs. Bandan often taunted her for this reason. The stress was worse for her when her own mother participated in taunt. She writes in her diary that she felt lack of love from her mother and extreme loneliness. She felt extremely lonely and suffocated when she was treated as a small illiterate child and her ideas and thoughts were not taken seriously. However, she was wise enough to balance her problem, focusing her mind on passion of learning. In such extreme harsh days of hiding, she learned foreign language. She learned history. Anne Frank also read a lot of books. Her maturity grew rapidly in the hiding quarters. She accepted this challenge of her life proudly. As the time of hiding became longer, constant quarrels began between members in small issues. Now, there was no source of motivation to be happy, neither outside nor the inside. However, a brave teenager started to find sense of humor in every small thing. Despite the horror and humiliation, she never gave up her hope and courage to live. Her hope of release was crushed occasionally by change in political scenario against them. Anne was loving child for her father, but confined in hiding quarters created the environment where sometimes the relation with her father were not as good as before. So her mental peace was disturbed occasionally for this reason. Her restlessness and anxiety level were increased as the hiding period became longer and longer, and it seemed to have no end. Her diary revealed as her time in hiding became longer, her longing to live a normal and happy life became burning. Before moving in hiding, she was a rich kid from a business family with comfortable life. But in hiding quarters, she was facing a hot summer without fresh air and cold winter without enough clothes. However, a young girl faced her suffering bravely and proudly. Her hope for good future never died, sustained by her warmth, intelligence, and rich source of her inner life. Anne wrote and thought much of the time without threat of death. A positive girl took this extreme situation as the opportunity to increase mental strength. Anne faced every extremity As a brave young girl, she still managed to have glimpse of happiness. She was a mature girl who examined her weakness and tried to improve them. As for book, man searches for meaning. A goal-driven person can bear any kind of suffering. Anne wanted to become journalist and writer and continued her step towards her goal even in her hiding quarters. That helped her to bear cruelties of life. She lived a life of meaning. It was already 25 months in her hiding quarters. The ray of hope of end of war was rising, but on August 4, 1944, information was provided by a Dutch informer. Nazis penetrated the hiding place and 8 Jews were caught. All of them were sent to concentration camp. That was a tragic end of all the hiding members in concentration camp except Otto Frank, a father of Anne Frank. A brave girl, Anne Frank, died in concentration camp in 1945. She was only 15 years old. In May 1945, war ended and Otto Frank returned to Amsterdam. He was given the diary of Anne Frank by his friends that was found on the floor of secret quarters. Anne Frank wished, "I want to go living ever after my death," came true. Today, Anne Frank Foundation maintains building where Franks hid for 25 months. Millions of copies of her diary were sold. She lived for a short period of 15 years, but she fulfilled her dream of writing. Anne's diary is an appropriate monument for her fine spirit and to the spirit of those who have worked and working for peace. Reading this book is rich and rewarding experience.